Welcome back to the Baby Sleep Connection. I'm your host, Heather Boyd, and I'm really excited today to have another occupational therapist on to chat with me. I always love to talk to OTs. We're a pretty small world. There aren't a lot of us, but this is an OT who does baby wearing. This is Jordan Morillo. Welcome, Jordan. It's good to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I agree. I love talking to other OTs. I feel like the world is so small. There's always just like one or two steps in between us somehow.
Yes, separation. What is it? The steps of separation that
Uh-huh.
that join us, and the fact that you do baby wearing and my
Mhm.
approach is very attachment. There's a lot of
Yes,
overlap there. So I'm
definitely.
excited to talk all about OT and baby wearing because I don't know any other OTs who are working in that niche in particular. I think it's novel. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are other people maybe casually doing it, but I don't know of anybody else who's like a dedicated, like I'm an OT who does baby wearing, period.
Yeah. Well, and I like the idea of OT well, we're going to get into it, but even just positioning and
Yes,
attachment and infant
sensory.
development and maternal
Yeah.
wellness and sensory. So we're going to get into all of that, but I'll introduce you fully first. I kind of
Okay.
jumped in with the part that was why we're talking today. So, Jordan is a maternal health occupational therapist. She's mom to one. She's a baby wearing educator, and she has a passion for helping parents find the joy in their family routines and daily routines, which I also love. I think it's the way to survive the first few years of parenting and beyond. Jordan started the Baby Wearing OT as a business in 2023. It's still a baby. I feel
Mhm.
like you've been around forever because I've been following you for what feels like a long time, but your business is a baby too. And
Mhm.
it arose out of the gap that you were seeing in perinatal care after you gave birth to your son, right? When you are not doing baby wearing and working, you love plants and gardening. You love exploring local restaurants and boba tea. I have yet to try a boba tea. We are only,
Heather.
I know, maybe we need to leave time at the end to talk about boba tea. I bought one for my teenager for the first time, but I passed. And so I'm waiting for my time for boba tea. But you also love the afternoons when you're on the couch nap trapped. And I know
Mhm.
we're going to talk about that too.
Still, yeah.
So and your little one, how old is your little one?
He will be 22 months in a couple weeks. He'll be 2 in March, at the end of March. So, and
Full
we
on.
still enjoy our daily contact nap. We do.
Absolutely. Love it. And we'll get into that too, because although most of my listeners will have baby worn at least some of the time, I
Mhm.
do want to start at the beginning and talk
Sure.
about what even is baby wearing? Why are we even talking about it? What does it entail?
Yeah, so baby wearing is kind of like the art, the practice, the science of putting your baby on your body and then using a carrier to keep them in place. And I say that very intentionally in that manner because I think sometimes when we look at like gear like carriers, we think about putting our baby into the gear, but the carrier is just there to serve a purpose to secure them onto your body. And so, really, when you're thinking about baby wearing, you're thinking about building that connection and like having that skin to skin contact and that positioning on you as the caregiver. And then that carrier is just helping them maintain that position and allowing you to hold them onto yourself hands free. But really, the intention behind baby wearing is definitely less so to focus on the gear, more so to focus on that like connection.
I love that. I'm glad you were so intentional with that definition. When I think about when I discovered baby wearing, it was through Dr. Sears and the whole
Uh-huh.
seven S's of attachment parenting, quote unquote, attachment parenting. When you've been in this field for a while
Mhm.
and you use baby wearing personally, give us some context around the landscape of baby wearing from a historic. This is a big question. I could talk to you forever just about the history of baby wearing. It goes, of course, way further
Yeah.
back than Dr. Sears. Wonder if you can speak to that broader picture of baby
Yeah.
wearing.
So baby wearing really developed back when humans developed the ability to use cloth or like animal hides as a tool. I mean, we have research that shows that like these hunter-gatherer mothers used animal hides to tie their babies to them so that they could move more freely. And it actually did all sorts of interesting things for our evolution, like increasing our brain size, if you believe that. And so we've been baby wearing as long as we've been using cloth or animal hide as a tool. It's not a new practice, it's not a fad. I feel like we hear, especially like my parents would say, like, oh, we didn't have baby wearing when you were little, or like you run into people at the store and you baby wear, and like the older generations are like, oh, I wish we had that. And I'm like, well, maybe your specific area where you lived missed that for a little bit when you were raising your kids, but like as a whole, humans have had baby wearing basically as long as they've been raising children. And there's all sorts of beautiful, like traditional cultural carry communities around in lots of parts of the world, like in Africa and Asia and parts of Europe, where like baby wearing is just intrinsically part of raising a child for them. And so, in a perfect world, like my job would be obsolete because we wouldn't need educators to teach us to baby wear, because it would just be like this integral part of like your village, and you would just grow up with the intrinsic knowledge of how to do it. And there are parts of the world where that exists and it's incredible. And then here in the US, I feel like we're kind of going through this phase where baby wearing is coming back, and it's sort of still caught in that like trendy phase where like everyone's like, oh, this is novel and new and interesting, when, you know, it's not and it is. But then also like the US loves its gear. And so you're seeing all of these like crazy carrier designs, and everyone has to be new and different and do all the things, when really like a simple piece of cloth is still ultimately like the most versatile, accessible, and easy way to go with baby wearing. So,
Yeah, amazing.
yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking about the Inuit culture here
Yes.
had a very distinct carrier, different than, I mean, I guess every culture would have developed their own based on
Yeah.
the resources they had and the materials and what they needed. But I'm picturing having seen one of those types of carriers for the Inuit too. You talk about designs and
Mhm.
the culture of gear and
Yeah.
accumulating gear. And I know, especially for very young parents, so often it is about the gear, not just for baby wearing, but
For
clothing
yes.
and for toys and for bassinet and mobiles and the whole
Mhm.
bit. I would love to talk about, give us a little framework of the variety. Now, again, we could talk for days
Sure.
about all the options, but maybe the highlights of the
Yeah.
types of carriers. And then I have a follow-up question, but let's start with
Okay.
what is out there, like for a parent who
Yeah.
maybe they have one carrier or they got one on their registry or someone gave them one after the birth of their baby and they don't
Yeah.
know what is it that I could be looking for or would be the right fit, literally and figuratively, broader around carriers that are available.
Sure. So I think I'll start with the two categories that are, I feel like, the most common here in the US, the ones that you're most likely to have on your registry. And then I'll go, but for me, I kind of view them as like six broad categories. So you have your stretchy wrap, which are that's what a lot of parents start off with as the newborn. That's your like one long, like thin, stretchy piece of fabric, and you wrap them in that traditional like pocket wrap cross carry on the front with the three layers of fabric going over top of them. And then they age out of that because it's stretchy, and so it gets saggy as they get older. And then a lot of parents are also pretty familiar with the full buckle carriers. These are things like your Ergo Baby, your Tula. You know, a lot of parents graduate to that because those are kind of the two that like we see the most. Just these are the ones your friends have. These are the ones that pop up on Google. These are the big name brands here in the US. But I think we're also seeing a rise in popularity of ring slings, which is one of my favorites. I feel like that's such a versatile and easy option to use. It has a learning curve. I mean, they all have learning curves though, right? But that's one that I reach for from newborn through toddlerhood. The ring sling is still my favorite with my son, and that's that one shoulder carry with just the piece of fabric and then the fixed rings that you thread it through, kind of like a D-ring belt. And then you have what we call your half buckle carriers. So those buckle at the waist, but they have long wrap style straps at the shoulders. And so whereas like the full buckle has buckles at the shoulders and buckle at the waist, and it's less customizable to different body types. Your half buckles and your medis are more customizable because they have those wrap style shoulder straps. And so those are going to be a little bit more complex to put on, but are like easy to go in between caregivers and have a more versatile variety of carrying styles that you can do. Then we have your woven wraps, right? Which is your simple piece of cloth. A lot of people, if they love the stretchy wraps, they might graduate to a woven wrap if they want to keep doing that wrap style. And those are just long, thick, woven pieces of fabric with little to no stretch that do all kinds of carries. I think you mentioned you were familiar with the woven wraps. I'm sure we could talk about how incredibly versatile those are for like days. I mean, woven wrapping could be its own like podcast series,
Yeah,
honestly.
I felt like as a mom of three that the woven wrap was like the
Yeah.
PhD
Yes.
for me. I needed a few kids to get through to the point where I felt comfortable, but by that point, I also had spent years and years just in stretchy pants and burped on t-shirts. So the woven wrap also gave me this sense of beauty. Like it almost
Yes.
felt like a piece of art at a time in my
Yeah.
life
Oh,
where, well,
definitely.
where I wanted a little, you know, a
Yeah.
little something special.
Yeah. I feel that way about the ring sling too. I feel like the ring sling instantly makes me feel chicer. Like I can
Mm.
have on like a plain t-shirt and some jeans and have my hair thrown up, but I put on a ring sling and I'm like, okay, like really I just need a cute pair of earrings and some fun shoes and like boom, this is a whole outfit. And then the last category of carriers I like to mention to families is the onbuhimo, which is another Asian style carrier, and it has no waistband. So it is a shoulder only carry, and it provides a high back carry, typically for babies who can sit unsupported through toddlerhood. It's a really nice option for like if you were carrying while you were pregnant with another child, or if you have a child who just like wants to see the world, it's very easy to put on. But yeah, those are kind of the categories that I like to talk about: stretchy and woven wraps, ring slings, full buckles, half buckles, and onduhimos. And then of course we have all of the hybrids and the variety of like traditional, like the different torso carries and things like that. But yeah.
Right, right. And then, of course, what some people may also have in mind are the structured, like backpack carriers that are more for
Oh
hiking,
yeah, like the hiking backpacks.
right? Which are, it's a whole other
That's
topic,
like
I
a
think,
whole
because
thing.
yes, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't typically wear that around the house when my kids were little. That
No.
was our fly to Florida and have something that we could have in it.
Yeah. The weight distribution is so different. And I would argue that
Very.
where I said earlier with baby wearing, like you put them on your body, but those hiking backpacks, you really are just like putting them in the gear and then putting the
Yes.
gear on. It's almost like a
Yes.
different practice
It is, yeah,
in
and I
some
think
ways.
and we haven't even delved into the benefits of baby wearing yet, but I feel like
Yeah.
some of those connection and co-regulation pieces aren't as built into that kind
Yeah.
of carrier.
Yeah. Or definitely modified at the very
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
So let's talk about the benefits then. Let's talk
Okay.
about what it is. What do babies get out of this
Mm,
practice? What do parents get out of this practice? What are the things that this gives us?
yeah. I will start with the benefits for the parents and then kind of tie it into the benefits for baby because I feel like we always put babies first. And I'd love to like recenter that narrative around the parents sometimes. So, some benefits that you can expect from baby wearing that have been like studied and proven. One is reduced cry time for your infant, which is also a benefit for them, but this happens because you have them on. And so you pick up on their nonverbal cues a lot faster and a lot more easily. And so they don't have to cry to communicate. They're communicating through gestures and facial expressions and wiggling and things, and you pick up on that faster. And so if you're someone who, whose nervous system like ratchets up really quickly and is activated by crying, know that baby wearing has been proven to like reduce that infant cry time because you're just going to respond faster and more easily before they get to the point of crying. We also see a reduced risk of postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression in moms and in dads. We see improved bonding and learning of cues, which kind of ties back into that reduced cry time, but especially for the dads, a lot of them, like if they're not the breastfeeding parent, sometimes in the early days, it can feel like, well, what can I do with the baby, like other than diaper changes? And it's like, well, you can wear them and you can have that special, like skin to skin moment that way. We also see improved ability to participate in meaningful activities. So, return to hobbies, return to like work around the house, engagement with if you have a toddler, like wearing your newborn lets you be hands-free and like fully engage with your toddler, which is really important because I know a lot of parents when they make that transition from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 are worried about missing out on the bond that they have with their child that already exists. And so baby wearing can help facilitate some of that. For and then also if you're breastfeeding, it's been proven to improve breastfeeding outcomes as well, just because of the close proximity to the breast, the likeliness that you'll feed on demand, the increase of like hormones that have to do with breastfeeding. And then in certain situations where maybe you wouldn't feed otherwise, you can feed in the carrier without having to sit down or leave or find like a secluded spot because it's just a little more discreet if that's what you're looking for. Um, and then for the infants, we see improved motor development because when they're awake, they're activating all of their like core and extremity muscles to be kind of helping hold themselves onto your body. They will kind of use you as tummy time in a way and kind of push off of your body and work on all of their milestones. This is why we often see around like 3 to 4 months when they're starting to roll, people are like, "Oh, they hate baby wearing now. All they do is push and twist and like try and get off of me." And I'm like, "No, they're not doing that. They're using you as a gem." Unfortunately, it's really overstimulating, but it does get better. Um, we see for the babies, we see improved language because they're centered in the conversation between adults, and also they can like view your facial expressions, learn about reciprocal language, get a lot of different input at a higher rate that they would if they were somewhere else. And also, you're just more likely to talk to them when they're like right there versus if you have them somewhere else. We can also use baby wearing as a therapeutic tool. Like if baby, like my son had a NICU stay and he was really sensory defensive when we got home, and I was able to use baby wearing as like a way to kind of introduce him to sensory experiences from like a safe place. And so we can use it therapeutically for things like that. We can use it for torticollis. We can use it for all sorts of like different tension protocols. There's so many
Oh,
that I mean, I
many.
could
Oh
go
my
on and on
goodness.
about.
I I was aware of some of those, Jordan, but not all of those. That's
Yeah.
really eye-opening for me. I mean, I knew it was good, but
Yeah.
wow. And particularly when you know that there's evidence and research to back
Yes.
up. It's not just that it feels good or feels
Anecdotal.
like we're able
Yeah.
to meet those basic needs. You
Yeah.
talked about motor development, and it's interesting because I'm a developmentalist. I work
Yeah.
with babies. I've worked with babies in infant development my whole career. And one of the interesting things that I've seen, but I didn't know the research on it, was that the baby wearing parents, it did feel like when I was seeing them in
Mhm.
clinic, the tummy time skill development
Mhm.
was paralleled, but I didn't have a lot to back that up
Yeah.
other than what I was seeing and observing. And so it really, I do find for the parents that come in and they are baby wearing, I'm far less concerned about how much
Yeah.
time are they spending on tummy time because they really are getting it. It's quite
Yeah, I mean,
extraordinary.
it's not quite the same as, like, free movement time on the floor for sure, but, I mean, it does like, that vertical inclined tummy time absolutely counts,
Mhm.
and we could talk about all the different reflexes that they could go through and work on integrating, like, just being on your body. It's incredible. It
Mm.
really is.
Well, and from an evolutionary point of view, I always
Mhm.
think like how much of human history have babies been close to a
Yes.
parent versus put on the ground? And I
Right.
imagine that yes, we have carpets now, we have comfortable indoor environments, but I can't imagine back in the hunter-gatherer days that there'd be
Right.
many tiny babies being put on their tummy on the ground.
Right. I
It just
agree.
wouldn't have
Yeah.
been conceivable. So there must be, yeah, other ways for that to
Mhm.
evolve or to emerge, I guess.
Right. I mean, yeah, but we talk about like the concept of like babies as a developmental being, and like definitely we can see that reflection in like their behaviors when they're being worn. Absolutely. I talk to a lot of parents about how like in the first few months I wouldn't even stress like necessarily putting them on the ground if they're not tolerating it well. If you're baby wearing or you're providing inclined tummy time like on the couch with you or something. Like I think this push for like free floor time from day one is sometimes very stressful for parents if their baby isn't tolerating it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stressful and it feels, yeah, very contrived or prescriptive at a
Yes.
time when babies' innate
Yeah.
need is that closeness
Hmm.
sensory wise to see you, hear you, feel the movement with you.
Yeah.
None of those things. If a baby is not so gung ho about the tummy time, none of
Right.
those things. Those things can come some other ways. One of the things you said was this idea of centering them in the conversation
Mhm.
and in what's happening around you. And I love that you've brought this up because I so often tell parents when they're looking at ways to kind of build the connection or reduce separation anxiety is to bring them along for the ride.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to center all the conversation to your child or
Right.
interaction to them or be talking to them all the time. They're absorbing just by being around. The role of baby wearing in that just
Mhm.
makes it automatic.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, I mean, the amount of exposure that they get to, like, your daily tasks, to you take them outside to go get the mail, you stop and have a conversation with your neighbor, you come back in, you're listening to music, you're kind of dancing while you're cooking. I mean, they're getting all of that just from being on your body. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's fantastic. And yeah, the communication piece you brought up too. When it comes to fit, because you were talking about all
Mhm,
these different kinds, and for parents that may either be new to baby wearing or maybe they're
mhm.
expecting a baby and wondering what one to try, how do parents settle on what's going to fit them well or work well for them?
I mean, ultimately, the absolute best way to settle is to find a resource where you can try on different options. A lot of bigger cities will have like lending library type programs. There are a few like virtual lending libraries that are popping up where they will like mail carriers to you. There's a few different try before you buy type programs, or you could try and connect with an educator or a local baby wearing group and try things out for yourself. That would ultimately be like my number one way to suggest finding what works best for you is just to try. Other than that, you can connect with an educator and do like a one-to-one. I do lots of prenatal consultations with people where even though we're virtual, they fill out an intake form with like their size, their height, like where they live, what's their climate like, what's their budget, what's their lifestyle, like kind of what do they have any aches and pains? Do they have certain sensory things I need to be mindful of? And we just go through this whole like interview about them and their life. And then I say, okay, I'm hearing maybe you try X, Y, and Z and see how you feel, you know,
Mhm.
but I would say my least favorite way for parents to discover carriers is to ask their friends what their friends like, because oftentimes, as much as we love our friends and our family, our bodies and our lifestyles and our needs and preferences are not. You wouldn't ask your 6 foot tall, 300-pound man friend what shirt he likes to wear when you're a 4 foot 11, like 00 woman. So like
That reminds me of my first foray into baby carrying. Actually, we went out, my spouse and I, to a baby wearing boutique shop where we were living
yeah,
in Toronto.
cool.
And all I'd ever heard of was ergo baby, ergo baby,
Yes.
ergo baby.
They do a
Everybody
very
loved
good
the
job
ergo
at
baby.
marketing.
Yes. And the people that I knew had them already and raved about it and assured me I would love it. So I
Yeah.
assumed I would love it. And thankfully, we tried this on. My 6'2" spouse
Mhm.
loved it. It was great. But on my short torso, it was
Yeah.
really awful. And I wanted to like it because it was what I
Sure.
came in planning to buy. It was
Right.
not the best fit. And there were so many other options. We found one that worked for both of us. So yes, it brings me right back to just, yeah, the idea that you got to try it to know
Yeah.
what's going to work and to suspend any assumptions you have about what
Yeah.
brand or what style baby
Definitely. I've
will
done
fit.
several prenatal consults where they were like, "Okay, we're building our registry. I have these 6. I just wanna narrow it down." And by the end of the consultation, they have a completely different list. And they're like,
Ah,
"I don't like any of the ones that I thought I was gonna pick." And I'm
yeah,
like, "That happens."
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things look back at when I was first baby wearing, and
Mm,
at some point my baby got too big for front carry. Ergonomically, it was
yeah.
just utterly painful,
Mhm.
and yet I still wanted to continue it,
Yeah.
and that's when the back carry comes in. I wonder
Mhm.
if because there's a shift, part of it is based on baby development, part of it
Yeah.
is their weight, part of it is the type of carrier you have.
Yeah.
Do you have any guidance or guidelines on that move to the back carry?
Yeah. So I've found that a lot of parents start to feel the effects of the front carry around 15 to 18 pounds, depending on the parent and their body type and how baby sits on their body. But that I would say like around that mark is when a lot of parents start to be like, my shoulders, that doesn't feel like I want it to feel anymore. So you have a couple options when you get to the point where like maybe front carrying is no longer what you want to have as your primary carry mode. There are certain types of carriers that provide a hip carry, which oftentimes that shift over to the side can be a little bit nicer for some parents just because it kind of distributes baby's weight differently when they're straddling your body off to the side. And you could do a ring sling or a med-eye or a half buckle or a woven wrap would give you like a nice hip carry. And then for back carrying, it depends. There are certain types of carriers like the med-eye or the woven wrap where you could, with support to make sure that you knew what you were doing and that you felt comfortable with it, you could back carry from month one if you wanted to. Obviously, there's safety criteria to follow with that. And I would highly encourage, like, if you are a new parent, new to baby wearing, that you link up with someone one-to-one who knows what they're doing so that you have all of that safety criteria and you have someone, because it's harder to check the fit on your back. It's a lot easier to just link up with someone who can tell you like, oh yes, this needs to be adjusted and we're looking for this and that looks good. But you can, if you either have a preference for it or if you have like a lifestyle, like if you work on a farm or you're a potter or something and you just need to have baby on your back earlier, you can do that very early on with support. But then in general, a lot of other carriers, like your buckle carriers, like your Ergo Baby, their safety metric in their manual is when baby can sit unsupported. So somewhere around 6 months for most babies.
Right.
Just because a lot of the buckle carriers provide more of like a mid-back carry. So it's a little bit harder to monitor baby and their breathing and their airways if they fall asleep. And so it is safe for them to sleep on your back in a buckle carrier, but we just want them to have like a little bit more sturdiness to them
I
for some of those
remember
mid-back carries.
I remember early on, my biggest concern was whether I've gotten it high enough so that it wasn't like
Yeah.
becoming mid to low back and
Yes. I
like
mean, well,
hiking it
and
up high enough.
just in general, a lot of parents, I think, are surprised that the buckle carriers don't offer a high back carry.
Mm,
They have this idea that like baby's gonna be able to see up over your shoulder, but a lot of times with those buckle carriers, that doesn't happen until they're older and just
mhm.
taller in general. Like a lot of 6 months do sit kind of below that shoulder level.
Mm.
So I think parents are surprised. I get a lot of parents asking, okay, well, I wanted to back carry them, but I wanted them like up. So what carrier options do that?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you've talked about how early back carrying can be done if you're supported.
Yeah.
What I've seen my African neighbors with newborn babies low down on their back in a woven wrap. And I think there is lineage of
Yes,
information that has passed
exactly.
down to them that I would look and think, oh my goodness, it's beautiful, but I could never have reached that
Right.
or tried it or felt comfortable with it without intense support. So I
Yes.
skipped that part. I skipped it, but
Yeah.
it's quite extraordinary to me to see just how the variations of how the holds and
Right.
carries
Well,
can go.
and they are those like low back torso carries. Those are some of the safest and the most supportive, but you really have to know what you're doing. And it kind of does like almost feel too intimidating unless you're part of one of those communities where it was like an intrinsic part. You just grew up around it. You didn't have to go through a safety check in your head. You just know what's safe and what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. In some ways, I mourn the baby wearing culture here that we lost that in the States and in Canada and parts of Europe. And I hope that someday we get back to that where we're not having to go through like a safety checklist in our head. We can just look and say, that's safe. We're like, oh, that's not safe. Let me adjust that real quick. I just know it's right.
Ah, that taps into the idea of that intrinsic instincts that
Yes.
have not just with baby wearing, but with so
Hmm.
much around mothering and parenting.
Hmm.
We've really, with a lot of the parents I work with, it's about waking that up again,
Yes.
that there is some inherent wisdom that's there, but we've defaulted to the external expert, often for good reason,
Hmm.
around
Sure.
everything. Like I think about where I would have been if I didn't have any support with baby wearing. I needed
Yeah.
somebody that knew more than I did to support me. But that intrinsic instinct piece of parenting
Mhm.
is really worth nurturing and building.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of that, like, with co-sleeping, with baby wearing, just, like, some of that people are like, "Well, how am I gonna know that they're okay on my back?" I'm like, "Because you feel them, because you're aware. You know that they're breathing, you can feel their little breath, like, against your child, you know what their movements are like." But yeah, just it is really hard to find that balance of, like, making sure that you have proper information to feel empowered and not having so much information that it creates noise in your head and, like, blocks you from being able to make decisions that feel best for you and your baby. That is absolutely true, and I think to some extent, like, that the rise of, like, postpartum anxiety that we're seeing, some of it is that it's just being talked about and diagnosed more and people are seeking more help, but I think some of it is like this age of information creates a lot of anxiety for a lot of parents. Like my mom would talk about, "Oh yeah, when we started solids, we just whatever the doctor told us to do, we just did it and that was that." And I didn't even know that I could do like baby-led weaning. I would have done that instead. But she's like, "But also like it was kind of nice to just
Not
have
worry.
someone that you trusted and they told you what to do and you did it and
Yeah.
your kids turned out great." And
Uh,
then now it's like, "Oh, do we do this or do we do that or do we do this or do we combine both of these things?" And like, how do I know? How do I know? And it's
mm.
yeah, it's very overwhelming.
Very overwhelming, and it's that external piece of, like, gathering more information than you need
Yes.
and
Yes.
not paying attention to that inner wisdom piece
Right.
to help you
Exactly.
at least weed out. You could cut out, I always picture a plate that you're just shoving half of it right off onto the floor and
Yeah.
you're left with half. You've at least cut it in half, and then you can
Yeah.
pay attention to what's gonna make sense from a logical point of view after
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely.
Both of us are OTs, so part of
Mhm.
our background is in disability.
Yes.
Can you speak to the nuance of baby wearing when there are some physical restrictions and disability?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it depends, like, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the parent, we might be exploring, like, seated options that might be appropriate for, like, wheelchair users or just parents who need to sit down more if they have, like, lower activity tolerance. So at that point, I would be telling parents to be mindful of the waistband type that they're choosing and to choose more of like an apron style waist or a ring sling or a wrap that doesn't put pressure on the torso the way those like really thick, like heavily structured buckle carrier waistbands do. Another thing that I've seen a lot is parents who have limited upper extremity mobility or maybe like some fine motor deficits, different things like that. And so I've worked a lot with families on like doing the t-shirt method for a buckle carrier where you can just slide it over your head and slide your arms in so you don't have to reach behind you and try and be pulling straps and buckles and figuring that out. Or like with the ring sling, there's different ways that you can kind of hold the fabric with your whole hand and use your arm to tighten instead of having to like try and pinch and use your wrist for more things. With babies, there's lots of things to consider, like if like when my son was in the NICU and he was like on a CPAP and had like a feeding tube and different things, like there's ways that you can baby wear if your baby is on oxygen, if they have a G tube, if they have low tone, if they have spasticity, there's lots of modifications and different things that we can make. And a lot of times it's not necessarily like by the book of what it's not in the carrier manual, but it's a valid and safe and correct option for these different families. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely lots of options for our families with disabilities.
And
So,
that, yeah, the essence of that is the adaptability piece,
yes,
right? Like in what ways or why do you want to use it? What's the purpose? And then how can we make this work?
yes,
Manual or no manual, it's adapting to the particular
yeah,
needs of the parent, right? And the
definitely.
baby.
I will say that I don't know if any listeners like need resources. Adaptive Parent Project is a great one. It's run by a woman named Alicia. She has cerebral palsy, and she's actually I've been working with her to come out with some modules both for healthcare providers and for parents on just like parenting with a disability. Like how do we set up the nursery? How do we baby wear? How do we feed? How do we do all these things? So I would definitely direct parents that way. She's on Instagram. She has a website. It's a beautiful nonprofit. The Adaptive Parent Project is a great resource for just parenting with disabilities in general.
Terrific. I'll include that in the show notes so people can find
Yeah.
that. Now, I know one of the things that comes up for you on social media is, I don't know whether to call them pet peeves or myths.
Yeah.
I'll let you choose. When you look at either how baby wearing is promoted or is actually used, like the
Yeah.
actual practices, what comes up for you as things you wish were different about how this is all playing out?
I'll say I'll pick two because I mean I could go on,
Okay, we'll limit it to two.
two that come up a lot for me are one, this marketing of like baby wearing is easy, that it's not something that is a skill that you develop. It drives me crazy when I see carriers that are like fast, easy, can do it in 2 seconds, don't even need to read the manual. Like, I don't know, this idea that you just like throw baby in and you go and it's fast and it's not. I mean, it gets to the point. You will get to the point in your baby wearing journey where I can sling my son into a ring sling in 10 seconds, from car seat to sling in 10 seconds. You get there, but it takes practice, it takes mindfulness. It shouldn't be something that we're like rushing into. It should be something that's like intentional, and you need to be, especially when you're learning, you need to be thinking about, did I double check that my buckles are on correctly? Did I double check that baby's positioned properly? Like, do I feel okay? Like, it shouldn't be marketed as just this like fast, easy, go, 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 go. Like, I feel like a lot of parenting stuff is marketed at that, like, how efficient can we parent? And it's like, what about taking the time to like slow down and learn and skill build and connect and enjoy and breathe? So that's one that I really don't love, when carrier companies just market it as like, oh, it's automatically something you'll be good at if you use our carrier. And it's like, it still takes skill. It's still learning. You still need to like do research and seek support, and it's worth the time to get it right, because this is a skill that once you learn, it's going to last you like through all the other babies you have, through your current baby, maybe up to like 3 or 4 years old. So, I mean, it's worth the investment of time and effort that it takes. And I think sometimes parents get really frustrated, especially with like ring slings and stretchy wraps and woven wraps. They're like, I've done it twice and it's not right. I'm over it. I thought this was supposed to be easy. They make it look so easy on social media. They just throw them in. Like, how come mine doesn't do that? And it's like, well, you have to learn. The other thing that I see is like, I hesitate to use the term influencers, but like social media marketing where the babies are positioned unsafely in the carrier, where their like head is sunken down into the carrier, their legs are not in a proper position, their back is not being supported. Like, I see so many posts and ads and popular viral videos where I look at that baby and I'm like, thank God that baby survived that carry, because they could have suffocated in that carry, and no one is saying anything. People in the comments are just like, oh my God, so cute. And it's like, that makes me so worried for that baby and for the people who see that and follow that example and think that's the way to use that carrier because they don't know better. And so I think just this like emphasis, de-emphasis on safety and emphasis on like cute and stylish and easy is,
Mhm.
it's really just doing us a disservice,
Mhm.
because it only takes once. It only takes one bad carry.
Well, and it's a hard topic to talk about because
Yeah,
anxiety is already high
sure.
for parents. And yet knowledge is power and it
Yes,
is safety.
exactly.
And when we know what not to do and what to
Yeah.
do within the realm of safety, then we're reducing the risk in the same way. It's a parallel conversation with bed sharing and
Yes,
co-sleeping.
exactly. That's exactly what I, as someone who bed shares and baby wears, I see so many parallels between, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And unlike 15 years ago, even when I still remember Facebook was relatively new and still had that
Yeah.
prompt of Heather is like everything
Oh,
was
yeah.
the is on there. And I think even between then and now, like when I became a parent and now, the external messages that we get to
Yes.
help shape. And it's useful on one hand because we
Yeah.
can find what we're looking for, but we have no way to, again, get rid of that unuseful or bad information.
Right.
And we're so external on the social media and not seeing it. If I had little babies right now, I don't see anybody in my neighborhood carrying their babies. Like it's
Right.
just, well, I shouldn't say that. There is one. But we seek the images around what to
Right.
do from social media now,
Yeah.
the good and the bad. So yeah,
Right.
that's a good thing to, well, it is such a parallel to bed sharing. I know even for me with images that get posted by social media, I like
Yeah.
on my own page, I sometimes catch images that I'm like, no, we got to take that down. I am telling my
Yeah.
assistant that one doesn't fit. Like, I don't want someone
Right.
to see this and integrate it with all the other good information that I've given. This is
Yes.
going to get all
I'm
muddied, right?
I know absolutely when I'm looking for like marketing materials or like pictures to use in CEUs, like the free domain, there's very little on like safe baby wearing, even in like that area where you go Google baby wearing photos and it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not safe, but
It's
you wouldn't
almost
know.
it's almost like there's an agency in Britain called Basis, I think.
Uh,
And they had a whole, I can't remember his last name, Rob Shank, I want to say, who did photography for them on safe
uh-huh,
baby wear, sorry, safe co-sleeping, safe
uh-huh,
bed sharing. And so it's all these royalty-free
yeah,
bed sharing images that I can use with confidence.
uh-huh.
Maybe they need a collection of photos like that
Yes, that would
for
be so
baby
nice.
wearing that you can, even if you're not talking about the particulars of how to
Right,
clip them in, it's an image you
just
can
it's
use
safe.
with
Yeah.
confidence. You have not veered away from criticism of those poor messages online,
Mm-mm.
even when it's been another healthcare professional or therapist. I've seen a couple of your videos where you have it in such a lovely,
Yeah,
succinct, clear, but not back down kind of way,
right.
brought down some of the poor arguments against baby wearing.
Yeah,
Can you speak a little bit on that? Because there are some concerns that aren't valid that a
yeah.
lot of people are focusing on that you've dismantled. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
I think sometimes a lot of these concerns that like parents or physicians or therapists have with like baby wearing being harmful to the child is because they've only been exposed to poor examples of baby wearing. There was a physiotherapist that I had like an in-depth, like massive, like multi-day discussion, like both on social media where everyone could see and then like in private messages. And it boiled down to like he had this idea that baby wearing in a buckle carrier was harmful before a certain age point because of it kept baby too straight, too flat, too straight, too like splayed out. And I'm like, but not if you're wearing them correctly. If you're wearing them correctly and they have like a relaxed spine and they have lateral support, they have support from the nape of the neck to the bottom, they've got that nice M seat with their knees higher than their bottom, and they've got a pelvic tuck and they've got access to their hands and they can move their head. Like there's nothing bad about baby wearing. There's no hard limit on how often you baby wear. It's not going to hurt your baby's hips. It's not going to hurt their spine. It's not going to keep them from developing their motor skills as long as you're doing it properly. Because, absolutely, if you were maintaining your baby in a position that put pressure on the spine or had their hips dangling, or had their arms pinned down or something, if you're maintaining them in a position like that for multiple hours a day, yes, that can be detrimental to them and their development and their safety. But if you're doing it properly, you're just boosting their development. I mean, we can even look at the argument of like, it's not good for their hips, but then we look at like the Pavlok harness for like hip dysplasia. We look at the braces, they mimic the position that a baby goes in a baby carrier if they're supported properly. It is
That's
the
right.
same
Yeah,
position.
it is. I
And I
hadn't
tell
thought
people
about
that
that.
all the time. I'm like, it's the same. The baby carrier is the hip brace. Like,
Oh my goodness. Yes, I hadn't realized that, but
Yeah,
yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, and thankfully with your niche and the way that you're looking at
yeah,
baby wearing, you have the knowledge and the resources to be able
right.
to, in a very informed, but not, I won't say controversial, not, what would the word be? Because so often on social media, it's about the conflict rather than the
Oh yeah,
resolution.
like the rage
Oh
baiting
my
and
goodness. Yes.
the like making like argumentative points for views. I hate that.
Well,
But I
I
get some of that sometimes too. Even like I posted a video about world facing and I said, as an occupational therapist, I don't recommend it. And people in the comments were like, how can you say it's bad? How can you this? How can you? I was like, that's not what I said. Read. I said, I don't recommend. That's my recommendation as a clinician. You don't have to follow it. I'm not making a mandate. Like,
Yeah.
it's a
I've
recommendation,
received the same with bed
Yeah,
sharing, where I've
I bet
said
you
bed
have.
sharing has risks that we need to be aware of to
Yeah,
reduce them. And I was told I was not clearly not attachment based if I was wanting to talk about the risks. And I thought, well,
abstinence
fine.
education does not help anybody, you
No, it
know?
doesn't. It
We
doesn't.
can't just not talk about we have to I think that's, like, where being an OT is so important, is, like, we're holistic. We look at, like, the full picture, the good and the bad, we look at all the tiny pieces and the parts, and so, like, that includes education on risks. Like, you wouldn't let your geriatric patient who had a stroke go home not knowing how to use their adaptive equipment because, like, "Oh, it's fine, they'll be fine." No, you have to talk about the risks too. You
Yes.
have to
Yeah.
talk about you need to give them the information so they understand why you're telling them to do
Mhm.
what you're telling, you
Well, I
know?
think it comes from this idea that you have to be all in on something, I think, right
Yeah.
now.
I
And that
mean,
if
I
you're
am
a
all
baby
in
wear
on baby
you're all
wearing,
in, but
but
that does not mean
that
you
means
ignore the nuanced
yeah,
conversation of how to make
right.
this a reasonable and safe practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really resonate with that whole challenge there, Jordan. How did
Yeah.
I there was something else I had in mind. I'm gonna cut this part out. What was it? I don't even think we're going to talk about contact naps, but maybe down the road I can get you on again.
Sure.
So let me see. How do I want to wrap this up? Do back carry. We've covered it. Oh, okay. Here it is. We are in the middle of winter
Yes.
where I live. You get a fair bit of snow too in North
Yes.
Carolina. I think
We
quite
still
a
have a
bit.
little bit in the backyard from earlier in the week. Yeah.
And we had a huge snowstorm yesterday.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
what are some considerations for those that are trying to manage? And I'm thinking especially for those early on who are trying to minimize the gear, like the
Yeah.
winter coat, the layers.
Sure.
What are some winter tips for bed wear? Sorry, now we're talking bed sharing. What are some winter tips for baby wearing?
Yeah. So, skin to skin is always going to be the warmest. So, we've even been talking about like I work a little bit with a local nonprofit here that focuses on infant feeding and emergencies. And we've been sharing some tips on like how to keep babies warm if you lost power and are somewhere cold. And ultimately, like that skin to skin is going to be warmer than anything else. So if you really wanted to, you could wear like just a tank top or like a nursing bra or something very light as your primary layer and then have baby in a diaper in the carrier and then add external layers on top of you from there. Or my ultimate recommendation would be to dress baby lightly in like a single layer as you would for like when you're inside, and to dress yourself lightly in a single layer under the carrier and then add your winter gear over top of that rather than trying to like put baby in their own coat and 6,000 layers and putting you in your own coat and 6,000 layers and then you're bulky and it's hot and then you step inside to Target for a second and then you're both overheating and like so ultimately, I would just stress both of you for like what your inside environment is, and then add a coat or a blanket or some bunting or something around both of you. And then just protecting baby's extremities. So a hat's a great idea, mittens are a great idea, long socks, things like that. But ultimately, like what we see more often than baby being cold because parents are very mindful of cold, like they know to check for that. They're very concerned about that is babies overheating because they were overdressed and then they went inside for a little bit and then they went back outside and then they went inside and all of a sudden you have sweat that's like sweating and drying and sweating and drying and sweating and drying and then like baby's overheating. And so I usually tell parents, just dress them how you would inside and put those layers exteriorly around both of you.
That brings me right back to all my babies were winter babies. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think early on at one point I had one of them in a onesie snowsuit. And I was like, what was the point of that? Because baby wearing is what I want to do so I can go in the store
Yeah.
and not take them out.
Right. Because then you have to take them out and take them out
Yeah,
of the
right. Have
layers and
one
like,
layer. Is it
yeah.
reasonable to bypass the baby wearing coat? Are there ways
Oh, yeah.
around that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so you have a couple options. You could just, I stole my husband's coat because he's bigger than me. It's big enough that I can zip it up around both of us. You could go thrift or buy a coat that's a few sizes too big. They make zip-in panels. If you have a coat that you love already, you can get online very easily, like a panel extender, and just zip that around both of you. A lot of times, baby's coat, if you like look at it, you can actually like use your zipper on one side and their zipper on the other side and just zip their coat into your coat.
Oh,
Sometimes, like, I'll just say put your coat on and use a blanket and just like wrap the blanket around your
tuck it all
torso and
in.
tuck it into the
Yeah.
carrier. There's so many options, but yeah, you do not need to spend like $200, $300 on like a
That's
baby wearing
great. That's
coat.
great. Yeah, I found a deal, I remember with my
Yeah,
little one, and it was kind of a sporty kind of Columbia style with
yeah,
all sorts of like rain hat and fleece and all. I loved it, but it would have
yeah,
been nice to have had the mindset to look for an alternative when I
yeah,
didn't want to do that.
yeah.
In closing off our conversation, because we could talk
Mhm.
forever, Jordan.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like
What
you and I could just keep
Yeah, in fact, I think I just have to have you back on again because we
going.
can delve into one of these topics even more detailed.
Yeah.
What's something, if it hasn't come up already, something that you wish we were talking about more? Not you and me necessarily, but more broader. Is there something that we're not talking about with baby wearing that you think we should be?
That's a good question. Gosh, I'm not sure. I feel
We
like
may
we
have covered
I
all
feel like we covered
all
all
the
the
basics.
things. Because normally I would say just like that intuitive parenting component, but we did talk about that. So because I feel like a lot of other discussions that I have with like other professionals around baby wearing, we get really wrapped up in like the components and the mechanisms of it. And then I'm like, but also I don't want to just be another like noise in your head. So also do
Yes,
what feels
yes,
best
yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Great, great. Where can people find you, Jordan, if they're looking to hear more from you?
Best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm super active on there. I make a point to like respond to comments and DMs and everything. So I'm on Instagram at the babywearing.ot. You can also Google the baby wearing OT and like my website and things come up that way. But Instagram really is the easiest, most consistent way to find me. I have tons of free resources for baby wearing on there. I have highlights organized by carrier type. So if you wanted more information on like a specific carrier, like a ring sling, you could just go find that highlight. And all of my videos on that topic are sorted in there. I offer virtual workshops through there a couple times a month. So that's a really nice place to kind of just get started on like your researching and your baby wearing journey. And then if you go through my Instagram and you feel like you need more support, I offer virtual services worldwide as well. I do full blown 45-minute consultations where we can usually go really in depth on one carrier, or we can do like fit checks for 2 to 3 different carrier types. And those come with a month of follow up support. So you don't feel pressure to get it all right in the consultation. You have access to me to troubleshoot, to fit check for a month after that. So you're successful. And then I also do little 15-minute virtual fit checks. So if you have a carrier and you're like, I feel like I've figured it out, but it's just not quite right, we can hop on and do a 15-minute fit check as well. So I have
Lovely.
worked with clients literally all over the world. I've had clients in like Sweden and Japan and everywhere. So we'll make the time zones work if need be. So
What an amazing opportunity, especially if there's nothing local for
yeah,
local try on or test on kind of group,
right.
and you want somebody that has the
Yeah.
background too. So I appreciate that, Jordan. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for this time today. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I agree, it was nice chatting, and I'm excited to listen to it later.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you again for your time. This was fantastic. Bye
yeah,
for now.
thank you.